The internet in 2016 was a very surreal place to say the least. This was the peak of edgy internet, cringe internet. You had Filthy Frank, you had iDubbbz, you had Leafiest here, Pyrocynical, Keemstar. The list goes on. This was the era of cringe. This was the era where we would look at something and be like, oh my gosh, guys, this is the cringiest thing ever. This makes me want to drink bleach. Am I right, guys? When it came to memes, you had stuff like Damn Daniel, arguably the last big meme to come out of the Vine era, as Vine would shut down later that same year. The death of Harambe, which in retrospect, I'm not sure why we made memes and jokes and whatnot about a gorilla dying, but sure, I guess. Again, it was 2016. It was a different time, okay? You had We Are Number One, which was actually a really good meme in retrospect, because not only did the song unironically slap, but it also gave a lot of people, myself included, nostalgia for Lazy Town, as someone that actually watched Lazy Town as a kid, and it was also for a good cause, as it was to help Stefan Karl, the actor that played Robbie Rodden, with his cancer. Unfortunately, in 2018, he would pass away, but, at least we helped him out with these videos. At least these videos were made for a good cause. And then you have the topic of today's video, the Nutshack. The Nutshack is a Filipino-American cartoon, the first Filipino-American cartoon apparently, so yeah, this is kind of historical whether you love it or hate it. It ran for only 2 seasons. The first season came out in 2007 and the second season came out in 2011. I don't know why there was a very long gap between the 2 seasons, but whatever. The show aired on this network called Mix TV, which I guess is like a Filipino version of MTV. I don't know. It was also the only cartoon to ever air on there, so like that's something interesting. And for a long time, this show was extremely obscure. Nobody knew about its existence. That all changed in 2016. You see, there's a YouTube channel named Siva Gunner that uploads quote-unquote high-quality video game rips, basically music from different video games and whatnot. However, all of these rips are usually edited to include like a joke in them, and there's a lot of specific in-jokes regarding Siva Gunner, and the Nutshack would become one of those inside jokes, mainly regarding the theme song of the show. I unfortunately cannot play the theme song for copyright reasons, but basically the theme song just mostly consists of the lyrics "It's the Nutshack" repeated over and over and over again, followed by like a small rap verse, and yeah, that's basically it. It garnered a lot of infamy. It became a massive meme. People were joking about how it's like one of the worst cartoon theme songs of all time. Yeah, it became a huge meme. Looking back at it now, the Nutshack theme song kind of slaps. I don't know about you guys, but it kind of goes. Like, if you look past the repetitive lyrics, the beat is actually like pretty good, and even if the lyrics are repetitive, I cannot imagine any other set of lyrics going alongside this beat, aside from "It's the Nutshack" being repeated a million times. You know what? Y'all, I don't care. The Nutshack theme song is unironically good, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. I'm tired of Big Brother trying to gaslight me into thinking that this is one of the worst theme songs ever. Man, shut the up. Y'all, the High Guardian Spice's theme song is genuine trash. That's what y'all should be clowning on. Leave the Nutshack alone. A lot of memes would be made about the theme song, most of which just consist of replacing the word Nutshack with something else. Like, I believe there was like a video that was like the Nutshack theme, but every time they say Nutshack is replaced with the B-movie script or, something like that. Stupid stuff like that. And then on the other side of things, the Nutshack garnered a reputation for being one of the worst cartoons of all time. It went from being this obscure thing that nobody knew existed to being one of the most infamous cartoons ever made. One of the most infamous bad cartoons. And then, ironically enough, after its initial popularity as a meme in 2016, after its resurgence in popularity, it became forgotten about again. Like, literally, as soon as the clock struck midnight and it was now January 1st, 2017, people just forgot about the Nutshack. It was no longer like a funny meme or anything like that. I'm not gonna lie, I felt unusually excited to do this show on this series because number one, I actually did watch the Nutshack back when it was a big meme. I do remember watching it when it was a big meme, and I also remember it being pretty funny in how bad it was. And number two, given a lot of the stuff that I have sat through recently, some of the worst shit that I've ever seen, I was ready to like kick back and just go back in time to 2016 and see whatever the this was all about. And I've got to say, for the most part, it did not disappoint. Not at all. I'm gonna start this off by saying that this is a weird show when compared to like some of the other shows that I've looked at. Like when you compare this to like Control Alt Delete or the Slim Shady Show, it's definitely weird to describe it. The thing with like Control Alt Delete or the Slim Shady Show is that like sometimes there were moments where they would be funny bad, you know, enjoyable in an ironic way, but there wasn't enough of those. Like in the Slim Shady Show, there's moments where it can be funny bad, but then for the most part it's just really awful. It's like offensively awful. Control Alt Delete is kind of similar in that sometimes it can be funny bad, but also for the most part it's just kind of embarrassing. Not really offensively bad, but just embarrassing and cringy to sit through. And then the Nutshack is a bit of a weird show in that case, because this show is kind of the opposite of Control Alt Delete and the Slim Shady Show in that for the most part it is really funny in how bad it is, but then there are rare instances where it's just really hard to sit through it. Like it's actually exhausting to sit through it. Thankfully though, the good outweighs the bad, and for the most part this is a beautiful train wreck of a cartoon. Adventures of Kid Danger was the only funny bad cartoon that I've looked at on this series prior to the Nutshack, and I must say it has got nothing on this show. I don't think I've ever laughed this much before when it comes to watching a cartoon on this series. Like, this is like a complete 180 from High Guardian Spice. High Guardian Spice is the most boring thing ever made. This is hilarious in how bad it is. It's so goddamn baffling that it's kind of entertaining because of it. It truly is the room of cartoons. Unfortunately, though, it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. Sometimes there are instances where the show can just be awful to sit through, and I mean like really awful. Sometimes there are moments where the show is just exhausting to sit through, and it's just like, oh god, you know, when will the pain end? But thankfully, that's not as common as the funny bad moments. This show, for the most part, is really funny in how bad it is. This is what I expected out of Slippin' Jimmy. This is what I expected out of the Red Ape Family. This is what I expected out of Control Alt Delete, the Slim Shady Show, any of those shows. I expected those to be funny bad. None of them were. On rare occasions they were, but for the most part they were not funny bad at all. Finally, after 14 episodes, we have finally found an honest-to-God, true, funny, bad cartoon. The best, worst cartoon ever made. So let's talk about it a bit. The Nutshack is about two cousins, Phil and Jack. Jack had recently moved from the Philippines to the United States, and alongside Phil, lives with their uncle Tito Dick, who I have to say is unironically and ironically the best character on the show. Tito Dick is quite possibly the greatest character in all of animation history. He just radiates so much Giga Chad energy, it's not even funny. In addition to these three, you also have Horatio, this thing that Jack has. It's like I believe it might be like an animal that's native to the Philippines. I don't know, but it's like a robot hybrid thing. It's honestly probably one of the worst things about this show, if I were to be honest. It has this really annoying high-pitched voice. Not only is it annoying as hell, but it's also like really hard to understand what this thing is saying sometimes. So yeah, that's an L there. I'm sorry. Rare Nutshack L. The only other main character that I'm gonna bring up is Cheetah, who owns this bar and is like Phil's friend, and Jack has a crush on her. I ain't gonna lie, guys. She's kind of, like, to be honest, I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying she's kind of, oh man, I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. There's a bunch of other characters, but I don't want to go into detail about them. I'm sorry. There's too many characters to bring up, and it's not worth going through all of them. So I just went through like the main characters of the show. The first thing that I want to say is that I actually kind of like the art style of this show. I get that it's a really ugly and unappealing art style, but I also kind of love it because it's ugly and unappealing. It just has that trashy Newgrounds look to it that I kind of love. This show came out in 2007, and I mean this in a positive way when I say that this is probably the most 2007 art style I've ever seen. Funny story, I remember when I was a kid on Nicktoons, there was like this Rocket Power ripoff cartoon. I don't know if any of y'all are gonna know what I'm talking about, but there was this cartoon on Nicktoons. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like this Rocket Power ripoff, and it had an art style that looked very similar to the Nutshack. And I believe back when the Nutshack was a meme, people were like making comparisons to it and this weird Rocket Power ripoff. I have no idea. If any of y'all know what I'm talking about, then yeah, let me know in the comments. Maybe that show might be searched for the worst cartoon worthy as well. Who knows? To give you an idea of just how absurd this show can be, there's an episode where all of the weed in the world just disappears, and so Phil and the gang try to find this place that apparently has like the last remaining weed in the world. And it turns out the person that caused all of the weed in the world to disappear is Bob Saget for some reason. It's really stupid, but it's also like, it's so stupid and so absurd that it's honestly kind of funny. It might be hypocritical for me to say like this is funny, but then when Slim Shady Show does essentially the exact same thing, it's not funny. But to be fair, when Slim Shady Show does something like this where it's like, oh, celebrity bad, am I right, guys? It's not done in like an absurd way. Most of the time it's just surface level insults and that's it. Here though, it's just so random and so absurd that it kind of makes it funny because of that. I'm not sure though, but it's such a stupid thing that it is honestly kind of funny in how stupid it is. I'm sorry. It's honestly fitting that I reference the Slim Shady Show and its constant celebrity bad jokes here, because in one episode of the Nutshack, there's like a parody cameo, whatever, of Eminem, and the first time I saw it, all I could think of was Slim Shady Show. It is now my personal headcanon that the Slim Shady Show and the Nutshack take place in the same universe, and you cannot convince me otherwise. I'm sorry. On the other side of things, though, there are moments where the show can be really hard to sit through. There's an episode, it's the final episode of season 1 actually, that is about, it's like a superhero parody basically. It features Phil and Jack as two superheroes named TT Boy and Kid Oot Oot. I have no idea what this means. Okay, this is definitely a Filipino thing that I'm not going to understand at all. It basically has Phil and Jack as these superheroes, as well as like Tito Dick as like this villain, and on paper this sounds like it could be like a funny, entertainingly bad episode, but it's not. In fact, this is probably the worst episode of the show. It's filled to the brim with a lot of like gross out moments and whatnot, and it's just not funny at all. Like, it feels like it's trying too hard to be like offensive and whatnot, and it's honestly not funny. Like, it doesn't work at all. It's like Slim Shady Show levels of bad, you know? That's the craziest thing. Like, this can almost be as bad as Slim Shady Show. There's no moment in the episode where it's like, it could be funny bad. The whole episode is just really hard to sit through it. I'm not sure if I can even be able to explain, like, the plot of the episode, because I don't want to risk demonetization. But yeah, that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how the Nutshack can be. Sometimes the Nutshack can be the funniest thing you've ever seen because of how bad it is, and then other times it is a f***ing nightmare to sit through it because of how bad it is. It's It's crazy how it could be like that. Again, though, the funny bad outweighs the offensive bad, thankfully. The voice acting in this show is really bad. I don't want to be like too mean because this is a Filipino show, so like there's obviously all the voice actors and whatnot are gonna be Filipino. So like I'm not trying to be mean or anything like that, but sometimes it is really hard to understand what these characters are saying. It's not just Horatio that's hard to understand. Sometimes a lot of these characters, like Phil, is like really hard to understand what he's saying. Sometimes he has this like nasal voice, like it sounds like he has like a cold or something. Sometimes the poor voice acting and the fact that it's like hard to understand what the characters are saying, sometimes that can add to the funny bad nature of the show. And then other times it's just like it's really hard to watch it because you have no idea what the the characters are saying. So again, it's like a 50-50. I must say, out of every cartoon that I've looked at on this series, this is easily the most entertaining one that I've sat through. There's just so much that is wrong with this show. This is probably the only time I'll have fun watching an infamous bad cartoon. To be fair though, this show was very obscure for a long time. From 2007 to 2015, it was just this obscure thing that nobody knew existed. And then in 2016, it became a large meme. It became highly infamous and whatnot. And then after that, it just became obscure again. Like, I still frequently see people bring it up as like one of the worst cartoons ever made, but nowhere near as much. Its peak was in 2016. If I made this video back in 2016 when the show was a big meme, then yeah, there's a chance that this would be a much different video. But looking at it all these years later, long after it became a meme, it's honestly really funny in how bad it is. Out of every cartoon I've looked at on this series, this is easily the best one. Like, there's not even a competition. It's obvious where this should go on the ranking list. It must go at the very top where it belongs. The king deserves to be on top. The Room of Cartoons. The best worst cartoon ever made. I'd also like to take the time to announce that I have moved the search for the worst cartoon ranking list onto IMDb, as making the ranking lists myself has become harder and harder the more cartoons I look at and the more cartoons get added. So I wanted to make this list to make it easy. Eventually at some point I was going to use this list as like the main thing for the show, and well, now I'm using it, so yeah. The Nutshack is the weirdest cartoon I've ever seen in my life, but it's also probably the greatest cartoon I've ever seen in my life, and also sometimes it is the worst cartoon I've ever seen in my life. While I was watching the Nutshack, I felt every emotion that a human being could possibly feel. It truly is a special show. It truly is one of the cartoons ever made. And god damn it, that theme song is good, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. After sitting through the boring nothingness of High Guardian Spies, this was like a much needed breath of fresh air. Finally, something that's funny bad. Something that I can watch and I can make fun of it for how bad it is. I can enjoy it in an ironic way. Thank goodness for that. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.